And we're back for this week's final segment of Red Hot Chili. The sun is down on here on the coast. Glad to be on the coast. Look, I'm in shorts, shirt sleeves out here, and it's probably what 60 degrees, maybe something like that. It's just not
very
cold,
comfortable,
but
a little chilly.
Yeah, it feels a little humid in the air always at the beach here, but it's certainly very bearable. And boy, I hate being in Santiago's heat, which is always raging even into the fall. You walk around and you just can't help from sweating some of the time when you're over there. Nothing against Santiago. I'd be happy to live there again. It's got its own beauty and its own benefits, but I also have to say that living here on the coast is a wonderful experience. Very happy for it. Speaking of smog, some people were complaining in today's press, since I want to mention a few current events at least this week, about the carbon footprint of Santiago. They're complaining that that the carbon footprint, the self-critical evaluation of companies, is only reported by 0.1%. Some of the media said 1%, so I'm not sure if it's 0.1% or 1% of all firms in Chile. That's 132 firms versus 96% of all firms in the United Kingdom. So we're really behind, of course, is the idea in reporting this. Frankly, I don't think we're behind at all. Radical ecology to me is just absolute nonsense. I mean, people who still believe in global warming really are very religious characters that are just not going to let go of the fact that they are dead wrong. Or they've just been dead deceived, or they're part of the whole game of fear-mongering where they're trying to earn money by books and seminars and getting people to pay to buy their products so they can clean up their carbon footprint. Carbon dioxide is a normal gas that's found in the atmosphere, and there can be warming or cooling periods in the period of the Earth's history, but the idea that man-made carbon or global warming can actually happen, and that public policy can somehow change that in any significant way, is absolutely preposterous. Excuse me, but this is ridiculous, and it's been going on ever since the last 20-30 years. The same crowd that used to talk about global cooling and there being in the 70s and early 80s icebergs in San Francisco Bay, then they switched to global warming, and then they found out after Kyoto in 1997 that the Earth has not gotten warmer any year since 1997. In fact, it's got cooler for the last 20 years pretty much. Oops. Well, and why is a warm world bad at any rate? I mean, a lot of people die from the cold every year. I mean, there's lots of reasons you want a warmer world, and all these myths about the ice melting and all this, the glaciers receding. Things happen, folks. I mean, this world is constantly changing. The way the world is created, it changes. And there are times that are colder, times that are warmer. This business about global warming being created by men and us destroying the world is pure fear-mongering. So I'm really, really proud of Chilean companies that they don't comply, that they don't get into this nonsense about reporting their carbon footprint, although some people here apparently are very worried or distraught or saddened by this fact. Not me. I'm glad that Chile is not politically correct, and I'm glad that I hope that it will stay that way and be able to maintain some of its traditional values. I know, Joe here, you've been happy to see what a traditional value wife, like my wife, Pamela, is very traditional. What do you think about her? Give some kudos for my wife.
Nothing like putting me on the spot, but it really isn't. She's a wonderful lady. Really enjoyed being here. She's very helpful. She's very friendly. She's very kind, and is amazing around the house. She gets to things before you can even think of them. Just constantly serving people around her. Really a wonderful lady.
Waits on you like hand and foot. It's a real.
You could put it that way too.
Well, no, I mean, and the point is, Pamela loves to do that. If you try to get in her space, I mean, it's her house, and if you try to get up there and clean a dish or get ahead of her and do something, she's going to squawk about it because that's her territory. She wants to really do well with her home. And if some feminists are listening, and radical feminists, and don't like it, listen, if you're a libertarian, you can be a feminist if you want, but you got to let other women do what they want to do. And if she enjoys having a life of taking care of her husband and her house, of her elderly father and guests, then you should be happy for her. And she's happy in Chile. And this brings up a great point. A lot of people call me, or they want to consult with me, and it turns out one thing they want is to find a wife. But I've mentioned this on the radio before, and elsewhere. It's a big deal. You get divorced in the U.S. frequently. 80% of divorces are initiated by women, and then they get rid of their husbands and go marry somebody else, and usually double dip, get some money from the first one on some child support thing or some payoff from the assets, or both, and then they get something from the second husband as well. And this is an awful thing that goes on in the U.S. I'm not saying that Chile's perfect as far as its divorce and remarriage rules, but it's a whole lot better than not remarriage, divorce and alimony and child support rules. It's a whole lot better than places like the United States or Western Europe. And so they come down here rather distraught about that, not wanting to take another chance, which is a pretty big chance on marrying an American woman, because it's really kind of a crapshoot these days. And you go maybe 50-50 chance of really being destroyed if you pay attention to economists like Stephen Baskerville, who wrote that book, Taken into Custody, and gives us those dire stats. Here in Chile, if you go down to the south especially, you find a lot of single women who are very traditional and don't want to just date for fun or you know, have casual sex, or, you know, are into this modern lifestyle. They want to just take care of a home and family, their husband, and do the right thing. And many of them can be very freedom-minded. And if they're not freedom-minded, they're very teachable, so that they haven't heard of libertarian ideas, for instance. You can show them how these things work and why it's better, and they'll adapt. They'll become very pleased with those ideas, especially if you show them as a good libertarian husband how to provide for them and bring a lot of romance and joy into their lives and security. They're more than happy all the time. It's a great thing to do to really treat your wife well. And then in response, I'd love to treat you well. So it's a great system. And in Chile, we still have a lot of very traditional women, especially, well, all through the country, but I find them especially in the south central part, from, say, you know, Rancagua or maybe Talca South. Santiago is kind of a mixture of modernity and traditional. It's still here too, but not as much as down there. So I'm not saying that other Latin countries also don't have the same thing. In Brazil or Argentina, although Argentina generally is a basket case, doesn't mean that it doesn't have high quality wives to find. Now again, if some people are going to say, what are you talking about high quality husbands? Well, because I don't know. I've never been in the husband market before, and I really don't ever expect to be in the husband market, so I really am not an expert to comment on. But I can comment about the wife market, and since 90+% of my clients are principally men, and many of them looking for wives, I guess it's the main thing to talk about. Since we're talking about my wife, and I appreciate Joe's comment, she is a wonderful wife. I should mention that as part of the consulting service that I can provide, not matchmaking. I don't do that. I certainly don't arrange marriages, but I can put you in touch with places where you can go and where you have optimal chances to succeed in your quest, if that makes sense. And I think that's a good thing to do. Nothing wrong. I'm not against marriage. If you are, too bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with marriage. In Chile, it's dying, the institution, like it is in America or Western Europe, but there's still enough life in it where we can actually have the values here that were once cherished in the United States, when marriage was the bedrock, the family was the bedrock of civilization and society. And we can promote that here. And coming here to Chile and trying to do that by establishing your own second family, even if you've been through a bad experience, this might be a great place to come just for that. Well, there's a lot of great things you can do in the country. I remember I was in Santiago late last week, and was meeting with some very influential people there in town. That's the weird thing about being in Viña too. Most people that come here only come here for the summer from Santiago, and you have all these enormous buildings vacant pretty much, like 90% vacant throughout the March through December, early December. Occasionally they come out on weekends, warm holiday weekends and so forth. But by and large, you have just vacancy because people only use them as a second home for the summer vacations. So there's not a whole lot of business that's done here, not a lot of office space compared to Santiago. But if you do live here, if you have the privilege of living here all year round, you can always get back to town and have the great medical care and meet the movers and shakers of the country. Even a lot of politicians. Remember, a politician doesn't have to live in his district if he's a senator or a congressman. So this last week, for instance, I met Senator Godoy, who was in a restaurant with a high-powered friend of mine I was meeting with over there, and I got to meet Senator Godoy. It's a young guy. Actually, he was at the University of Finisterre when I was teaching there back in the 90s. Vaguely remembered me. I am not surprised, because he was a very young student at that point. He's still pretty young by my standard, at any rate, as a representative of the Diputado here. And so, you can live over here, and yet you can go to Santiago, have all the benefits of the city, and meet people that really make a difference. And I was able to make a few comments from a libertarian point of view. Now, this guy actually left the Renovación Nacional party with a number of others who are upset with the way things are being run. But you have access to these people. You actually have access to these people as libertarians when you get involved, start speaking Spanish. That's why it's one of the worst things to do is stay on the island and only speak English here. You can actually get involved with people's lives that make decisions, public choices, as we say in economics, that affect other people. And I'm proud to be able to be here and do that. I think it's a wonderful feeling. I never had that kind of influence in the United States, probably never would. And so here in Chile, we can have that. Living in Viña del Mar also is either, or of course living in Santiago would be obviously the same. Hobnobbing with government representatives and other powerful businessmen is a great pastime here in Chile. All right, well, I wanted to also comment a couple other pieces of information. One has been important to mention. Some things are just absolutely stupid that go on in this country. Like up in Iquique, a man was just arrested for price gouging. A taxi driver that normally drives people from Iquique up to Alto Hospicio, the neighboring city that's poor, normally for 4,000 pesos or $8, charged 20,000 after the earthquake because of scarcity. Demand rose, quantity demanded, and all these things. If you know simple economics of supply and demand, the guy was arrested. I mean, this is the kind of stupidity that goes on in public policy here. You arrest a guy because he charges too much money because they don't want to let the price system work in some of these places. So there's a big problem in Chile. This kind of stuff, this kind of mentality needs to go. And we need to point it out that this is ridiculous. And I think I'm going to do that. I might even write a letter to Edward about this coming week. There's also another stupidity that, speaking of stupidity here, if you buy a property, a piece of property, normally in an apartment building, what we call in the U.S. a condo, you have a community standard or some kind of rules that you sign up for, and you abide by those. It's by contract. Well, in Chile, if there's one that's not even written, and you buy, for instance, into a lot that's in a group of lots, someone can go out and declare it as a community because they're all next to each other, and start forcing you to pay to grade the road or to do something, put a gate in or put a guard in that you never agreed to, and somebody else can actually assign the cost to you. And unless you object to it, you have very little standing. The law actually is so communist or socialist in some of this stuff, and we have a lot of legal faculties here are totally overtly to the left. It's really bad. Economists are great, but lawyers are not great in this country in general. Something we have to work on when we're here is getting these lawyers turned around and getting the law school people to understand something about economics and moral philosophy and libertarian principles. Because you can imagine, you buy a lot, you're not expecting to be charged anything for it. All of a sudden somebody sends you a bill, and blocks you from getting in because they threw up a gate and you haven't paid your share for it. Well, I don't even go there. Well, it doesn't matter. You're in the community. We declared you to be in this community of lots, and therefore you're stuck. Well, I'm still actually looking into that for a client right now to find out if there's any way around that, but it's difficult, and the lawyers they get are obnoxious to defend this idea with their communist principles they learned at the University of Chile. It's a very deadly place as far as liberty goes, and it's something we have to work on. All right, last thing to come up with, we're coming to the end of the show. This time just flies here. I was out with Joe today and we were looking at products costs. Normally imported goods are very expensive. I always said that, and it's because of just with taxes and so forth, but not so much that. It's just there's a monopoly here and they don't have enough imports. And what did we see today? We only got a minute left on the show, Joe, but give me your opinion. What did you think about the imported goods you saw? Refrigerators, blenders, coffee makers, whatever you saw.
My wife and I have been pricing these things a lot recently, and so a few of the prices were fresh in my mind, and I was really surprised. I expected to see prices a lot higher. We hear about the electronics and that type of thing being so much more in Chile, and yet what I was seeing for refrigerators, nice refrigerators, was very competitive, maybe even those that are of like quality being a little bit less here than what I'm seeing them for at Home Depot or what have you in the United States. So it was very encouraging for me. Same with the washers and dryers. They look a little different, but other than that, it looks very competitive.
Well, I appreciate the comment. We only got a few seconds left in the show today. That's important because in the blogs, I'll say there are things that are way more expensive in Chile, and maybe that's actually changing. Those haven't been updated for a few years. Well, this brings us to the end of the conclusion of another edition of Red Hot Chile with Dr. John Coben on the Overseas Radio Network, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Well, YouTube listeners, now you've seen a full radio show out here in beautiful Viña del Mar. Look at that sunset. Well, I guess you can't see the full sky. Maybe you can give them a camera shot over there.
See what I can
wires
do.
and so forth. But Joe might be able to get that for you. But it's a beautiful sunset. It's been a beautiful time out here in the early fall in central Chile to do the show on YouTube for the first time. Full show.
Nice. It's just a beautiful night.
It really is. Really is. Well, Chile's a beautiful country. It's clearly the most beautiful country I've ever seen in the world. I've been to 70, not quite as many as Simon Black, but I think even he has to agree it's a fabulous country as far as natural beauty. And this is a big city. This is what you see in just a big city in Chile that has a lot of downside to it, but there are areas that are so pristine and wonderful. And I'm just really glad to be able to live here. It's a great place to be stuck in. imagine what it was like being said if you were stuck in India or Nigeria, other horrible places that I've been to. If you're one of those places, I'm sorry, but you live in a really bad place. This is Dr. John Coben signing off for YouTube today on Red Hot Chile.